2 years into the struggle to drive out this regime, one of the biggest stumbling blocks we've hit is that people have not confronted that what we face is fascism. Even many of those who say, yeah, it's fascist, really don't get where this can go. Because what we face is fascism, as each day makes more painfully clear. The prescriptions being promoted are dangerously inadequate, and they do actually harm. We need ourselves to be ready to hammer at what is really going on and not let people change the subject to the prescription, such as the Democrats, elections, Mueller, when we haven't settled on and don't agree on the diagnosis. When we're starting from the diagnosis, we can objectively evaluate whether or not the Democrats are playing a positive role or not. If you are ill, the diagnosis matters tremendously. Are you facing a virus or a cancer? Do you need chemo or will chamomile tea do? Whether chemotherapy is too extreme, too risky, has everything to do with whether or not you have cancer, whether or not that cancer requires chemotherapy. This situation is no different. We need to understand and argue for the reality, the emergency of what we are facing, so that ourselves and others can fully grasp the only conscionable prescription. So let's look at the horror we face: an escalation and departure from the normal functioning of the nightmare of capitalism, imperialism. Our diagnosis: fascism, a qualitative change in a form of rule which eliminates traditional democratic rights. We are confronted by, we are being ruled by a fascist regime. As we state in our call to action, which you can find at refusefascism.org, the Trump-Pence regime is radically remaking society, step by step hammering into place a vicious American fascism. This is not insult or exaggeration. It is what they are doing. It is what they are doing. We are 2 years into a fascist regime that has banned, terrorized, jailed, and deported, killed those it deems less than human. It imposed a Muslim ban, demonizing and cruelly punishing a whole religion. 37,000 people prevented from holding their loved ones, attending international conferences, and pursuing their studies or careers. The attacks on immigrants, a battering ram and linchpin of this fascist regime. Their program of genocidal ethnic cleansing has advanced with Trump's national emergency declaration to build the wall on the already militarized border, tear gassing children and installing barbed wire fencing to shred their skin. The wall is both a toxic symbol of and celebration of xenophobia. It will literally kill people, driving desperate people, including children, to even more deadly attempts to escape unlivable conditions created by the US. Immigrants are dying in the desert. Those who offer water to them are criminalized. Immigrants are suffering in hellish concentration camps. The wall concentrates the shattering of old norms and cementing of Trump's new order: America first, make America great, no white again. And if you're just joining us, we're encouraging folks to turn their video camera off and mute themselves. Welcome. Thousands of children have been ripped from their parents. The Trump-Pence regime has done this to such a great extent and with such disdain for their humanity that reuniting them may not be within the realm of the possible, according to the administration itself. 15,000 migrant youth languish in inhumane and barbaric cages in blatant and sneering disregard to their humanity or for public outcry, court rulings, or congressional hearings. Jacqueline, age 7, and Felipe, age 8, died while in the care of US Border Patrol. Almost 500 parents, we're now learning, were deported without their children. A sickening increase in child detention has included at least 9 infants being held behind bars in family detention in South Texas, where they are becoming ill. One infant turned 6 months old while in detention, and another has been illegally detained for more than 20 days. The pro-life Trump-Pence regime's inhumane detention is responsible for the miscarriages of 28 migrant women. The demented bully in the White House is threatening all of humanity with a finger on the nuclear button. As the Trump-Pence, someone trying to get on the call. As the international community looks on in disbelief and the Democrats attempt to position themselves as the real national security party, AKA war party, Trump is reorganizing his military to execute regime change by crippling sanctions and possibly invasion of Venezuela. Iran is getting killing sanctions again, as is North Korea. And just this week, Trump ended reporting requirement of civilian deaths from US drones. And this has been a executive order that was done during Obama that Trump has ignored since he's taken office. But now it's official that annually civilians killed by US drone strikes outside official war zones will not be reported. And this matters enormously. In the 2 years that Trump has been in office, over 2,200 drone strikes have happened, more strikes than occurred over 8 years under Obama. This is very disturbing and should concern everyone who cares about the people of the world. The regime has bludgeoned the truth, overturned the rule of law, and incited physical violence against the press. Trump announced at CPAC that he will sign an executive order requiring colleges and universities to support free speech, meaning not allowing protests of right-wing speakers, to receive federal research grants. This is an intellectual blitzkrieg to normalize fascism on campuses in the service of the Trump-Pence regime, which is shredding legal and political norms, demonizing group after group, moving to crush any opposition and to consolidate fascism in the USA. And it's worth paying attention to the criminalization of dissent as well, and the fact that ICE has been surveilling groups in New York City that have been involved in anti-Trump protests, including Refuse Fascism NYC. This regime is moving, including through packing the Supreme Court with a pro-fascist majority, to reinstitute the most vicious traditional values, including dehumanizing and persecuting LGBT people, and imposing a Handmaid's Tale vision of women as breeders. They are advancing towards the realization of their goal of defunding Planned Parenthood, the main recipient of Title X funding, and slamming women back to the dark ages through their domestic gag rule. Changes being made to Title X are an extreme escalation in this regime's war on women, and will strip any medical provider receiving federal assistance from the ability to refer patients for abortions. This domestic gag order's physical separation requirement will make it physically and financially impossible for most organizations to perform abortions. It will have devastating effects for millions of women. This regime pours gasoline on the planet's environmental emergency as droughts and extreme storms already begin to destroy ecosystems, displace people, and threaten millions more. They have declared war on the science of climate change and on science itself, while historic greenhouse gas thresholds and deadlines for urgent action fly by. And the Trump-Pence regime has unleashed MAGA mobs and terror, including armed thugs ready to follow whatever orders Trump issues. This is not a normal presidency. It is working every day to bring about an American fascism, manifest destiny, and American exceptionalism. A fascism wrapped in the Bible taken literally, and the American flag, saturated with racism, misogyny, and xenophobia. I encourage everyone to steep themselves in Bob Avakian's talk, "The Trump-Pence regime must go. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. A better world is possible." To more deeply understand the threat that is posed and to help struggle with people who believe that fascism just couldn't happen here in America. And that's available at refusefascism.org. Why did I just go through all these horrors? Because it is necessary to remind ourselves why we are here, why we are doing this, when we and those we are reaching out to are being led to forget all this and focus on the 2020 elections. The biggest problem with waiting until 2020 to do something about the Trump-Pence regime is not just that it is too long to wait. The biggest problem is it means making peace with the horrors that have already been locked down or set in motion. Can you really make peace with any of this? Through the sheer, unrelenting, outrageous horrors, people become inured and the madness gets normalized. All the while, qualitative changes in how society is governed barrel forward with the aim of eliminating traditional democratic rights. This trajectory will continue, become worse, and can be made permanent unless and until we force them to stop by driving them from power. Will we confront what humanity faces and act accordingly? Or will we passively wait it out, accepting a horror beyond what we ever imagined? Back to the diagnosis example with cancer. If our diagnosis was a dangerous cancer, would we buy the prescription of a snake oil salesman? If our friends said, "I have cancer," would we suggest that they go see a snake oil salesman? Fascism is the diagnosis, so it requires a radical treatment sufficient to stop it. And this is why we say fascism cannot be voted out. The people must drive it from power. As Coco Das, contributing editor for refusefascism.org, stated in "We Can't Wait on a Savior, We Must Refuse en Masse," which was published at Truth Out and was reprinted at refusefascism.org. She said in regards to this, "In the eyes of many people around the world, the majority of Americans are already complicit. If this is true, then every one of us with a conscience has a responsibility to transform this reality. It is not enough to say, this is not who we are. In fact, this Make America Great Again fascism is deeply rooted in the country's history of white supremacy, slavery, and genocide. If you are relying on your faith in that system, hoping it will correct itself and give us something slightly better eventually. You are accepting horrors that are only going to get worse and making excuses that history will not excuse. And this makes me think a lot of something that was said by Pastor Martin Niemöller, something that's a lot less famous, but as equally important as his verse they came for. Quote, he once said that had they stood up to Hitler at the very beginning, at a time when the direction and logic of the Nazis was clear, but the carnage had not yet fully begun, that even though there would have been tremendous sacrifice, it would have been worth it. It might have worked, he said, and think of what we would have avoided if it had. We surely face a situation no less grave than the situation Pastor Niemöller was describing in the early years of Hitler before the Holocaust. Let's be honest with ourselves. The so-called #resistance has essentially served to normalize the fascist regime, fixating people on the Mueller investigation, on the new Democrats elected to Congress, and now on the 2020 presidential election. Let's get real. The Democrats are not stopping the nightmare as they continue to collaborate with this fascist regime. Following them, relying on them, leads to catastrophe. You can see this in what happened around immigrants, where they fixated the conversation around the cost, not around the fact that a wall would be devastating to human beings. They focused on finding new technological ways to have border security, not that this was a regime that was demonizing and terrorizing our people, immigrants. Coco Das is a contributing editor for refusefascism.org, and I really think is a model for how we need to be struggling with people around these prescriptions that do not match the diagnosis, around these harmful dead ends. And she does this with both invitations and challenges to these people. And she recently wrote a provocative and powerful piece. Many of you might have read it, Women in White Surrender to Trump's Thoroughly Fascist State of the Union. And then people responded to her piece. It was quite controversial. And she then gave another response, a follow-up piece. And both of those are available at refusefascism.org. And I really encourage people to study it. But I'm going to excerpt it here. Trump's State of the Union address on February 5th was a disgusting display of white supremacist demonization of immigrants, straight out of Hitler's playbook. Christian fascist lies about abortion that went almost completely unchallenged in the news commentary, vicious America First chauvinism, putting Iran, Venezuela, and the people of the world in its crosshairs, and a grim glimpse of our nightmare future if fascists are allowed to consolidate their power. She goes on to say, at Trump's State of the Union, the women in white showed us that they are ready to do their job, to collaborate with a fascist regime and lead their followers to do the same. This is what it is, not the politics of resistance, as Trump called it, but the politics of conciliation, the politics of complicity, the politics of collaboration. If you found yourself fooled by this spectacle, if you were comforting yourself with some hope that this regime will be stopped by sarcastic clapping and eye rolls, snap out of it. It's long past the time to dispense with the leadership of those who are leading you down a road to disaster. It is up to us to stop this catastrophe for humanity at the soonest possible time. Thousands leading to millions in the streets, day after day, acting with courage and determination, and refusing to go home until this cruel, illegitimate, fascist regime is removed from power. So again, this piece is available at refusefascism.org, and I really encourage people to read this full analysis, in addition to reading many of the articles on the website that are digging into why it is up to the people to stop this. One thing that I would also add is that the Democrats are determined to maintain order, even if that means the order of fascism, rather than risk the instability that would occur if they confronted the fascism and drove it from power, the situation where we would need all those people in the streets. And for more in-depth look at that and why the Democrats are doing what they're doing, I encourage people once again to check out the Babavikian talk, "In the Name of Humanity, We Refuse to Accept a Fascist America. The Trump-Pence regime must go. A better world is possible," at refusefascism.org. So what could stop this nightmare for humanity? An unrelenting, uncompromising mass movement of people, from the big cities to the small towns, from the campuses to the churches and synagogues, everyone from all walks of life planting themselves in the streets, demanding the Trump-Pence regime must go. Not just coming out for one day as a ritualized protest, but coming back day after day in growing numbers and in growing determination. Not as a gimmick to get people to the polls, not to change what's in people's heart, but the Democrats' hearts, but really to create a situation in which the demand, the Trump-Pence regime must go, is met, and the vicious fascist regime is driven from power. Bringing that movement to life is the mission of refusefascism.org. It is the only organization with such a mission, one unifying goal: to drive out the Trump-Pence fascist regime by mobilizing the people. And that is why it is so essential that 50 more people step up now to sustain it. Confronting the reality of what this regime means to humanity, what it's already done, what it threatens to do, and the pieces of the fascist clampdown it has already put in place, is not trendy at this moment. It's easier to put one's faith in fatal illusions that change will come without the kind of sacrifice and struggle Refuse Fascism is fighting to bring forward. But trendy or not, truth is truth. This is fascism. And every great cause in history, like ours, has had to fight repeated rounds to win a critical mass to act. We need to be boldly and creatively spreading the analysis you can find at refusefascism.org. What is the diagnosis? It's fascism. And the only prescription that matches that diagnosis is driving the regime from power for sustained, nonviolent, mass political resistance. On refusefascism.org, there are indictments of the Trump-Pence regime. There's a call to action. There's articles about the important insights and a gaping hole in Jason Stanley's How Fascism Works, the latest piece by Coco Das, many other pieces that really are getting at what is the diagnosis, what is the prescription, what challenge do we face, what action is commensurate. And we need to be boldly and creatively bringing those alive for people. Whether Refuse Fascism can reach people and speak to them with our powerful and inspiring message that connects with what people really know in their heads and in their hearts to be true, depends on people stepping up to become a sustainer of this urgent work. Sustainers matter not only for the dollars that are brought in each month, but in the pledge that each of those people make to not stand aside and instead to stand with all of humanity and struggle with all they have so that the just demand the Trump-Pence regime must go is met. Monthly donations support the national office, the nerve center for this movement in New York City, organizing and leading chapters around the country, reaching out to broader forces from all walks of life, publishing and promoting the diverse and incisive voices on our website who penetratingly analyze the danger we face and point to openings and ways to act together to end this nightmare. Sustainers form the backbone of support for this movement from which it can grow. Every sustainer we recruit makes a difference in how many people are awakened and are drawn into the great struggle to drive out this fascist regime. So before I would go on to some tips about the sustainer drive and turn it over for model phone banking, I'd be remiss if I didn't stop now and say, based on what you heard, if you are not yet a refusefascism.org monthly sustainer, please tonight, right now, join us. Visit refusefascism.org and click on the Sustain Monthly button. Give up a Starbucks a week. It's about $5 each time you go to Starbucks. About $35 a month makes a tremendous difference in projecting the demand the Trump-Pence regime must go society-wide now, providing that backbone from which this whole movement to drive out this regime can grow. Again, refusefascism.org. If you can give $5, give $5. If you can give $100 a month, give $100 a month. No matter what you can give, making that conscious commitment each month to support this mission and enable thousands of people to come in contact with a way to stop this nightmare matters enormously. So sign up today, be part of recruiting the thousands who bring forward the millions that it will take to drive out this regime. Again, refusefascism.org. If you want to donate via PayPal, that's another option. If you want to give via check and make a check out to refusefascism.org, you can do that as well. If you need the address, let us know in the chat box. So I'm just going to give you a moment. If anybody wants to let us know in the chat box that you're signing up to become a sustainer, that would be great. There's 28 people on this call now. Many of you may already be sustainers, and we greatly appreciate that. And not we refuse fascism, but humanity greatly appreciates it. So I'm going to continue with a few points. Oh, somebody just signed up saying that they'll be a sustainer tonight in the chat. Thank you. That's awesome. We had 4 people so far have signed up since we started. I'm going to make the chat public. Sorry, I didn't realize it was not. Since we started, one person is sustaining at $3 a month, and that's awesome. Someone else is doing $35 a month. Again, whatever people can do really makes a difference. So I just wanted to make a few points about phone banking itself, and then I'm going to turn it over so we can have that motto. Through making these calls, all month long, we're hoping people make calls and invite people to become sustainers. Invite people to be part of driving out the Trump-Pence fascist regime. Through making these calls, we are making the case for what is in the call to action as the only viable way to end this nightmare. And again, what's in the call to action is the way to end this nightmare? Unrelenting mass protests by the people demanding that the Trump-Pence regime must go. So making these calls makes the case that this is the only viable way to end this nightmare, and that donating each month to this great cause is therefore one of the most meaningful ways your resources could be spent. We need to be struggling with people who care deeply about what is going on in the world, what this fascist regime is unleashing on the planet. People are horrified, people are disgusted, and we have to ask people with a lot of heart and not in a snarky sense, how will their plan, what they are doing, stop the Trump and Pence regime and what they are bringing into being? How will their plan stop the further development of the fascist social base that is emboldened to achieve their objectives? And as part of this, I really recommend that people use the resources available at refusefascism.org to help make that case to people. Everyone in refusefascism.org is working together this month to reach the goal of 50 sustainers. Chapters, organizers should decide their goal, who they are going to, and how they will reach them. Phone banking is key because it gives you that personal connection, the opportunity to make this case to people. But we need to be incorporating Ask for Sustainers in everything we do, including it in your local e-newsletters, on social media, in pitches that you do at meetings or events. People can sustain online at refusefascism.org via PayPal and by check. Phone banking resources, including a script, are available on the website refusefascism.org under latest news. Please reach out if you want to volunteer to help with any resources, making videos, making graphics. People need to see this a variety of ways, many times. You're not done phone banking until you let us know how it went. Let us know the pledges that you received, how it's going, how phone bankers feel like it's going, what you are learning, arguments that are working and not working. We want to learn and grow together to drive out this Trump-Pence fascist regime. If you are a sustainer, we really would want to be sharing why people are sustaining. And so please send us a video, quick video of why you sustain, or send us an email about why you support refusefascism.org each month. And encourage sustainers that you get to sign up to send video or written statements on why they're signing up. So I'm going to stop for now. I've talked for a while. I'm sure I still have more to say, because I want to be able for you to see phone banking in action, role-playing phone banking and answering those tricky questions is something that I encourage all chapters to do before they start making calls. So to give you an example of that, I'm going to ask Barry and Kat to unmute themselves and share with us what phone banking is like. They're going to be using the phone banking script that's available at refusefascism.org. So Barry and Kat, are you here? Are you ready?
Hello, this is Kat.
Hi, Kat. Are you with Barry?
No, he was calling in separately.
Okay.
Do you have him?
I am unmuting him.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Okay, Kat, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. So, ring. Hello. May I please speak with Felicia? This is Barry, and I'm a volunteer with Refuse Fascism. We're in the middle of a sustainer drive. We're looking for commitments for monthly sustainers for Refuse Fascism. Do you have time to talk?
Sure. Hi, Barry.
Hi. Well, first, let me thank you for your support. We've talked at several protests, and you know that we have analyzed that what we face is a fascist regime, and that what we need is a mass movement from below to drive this regime from power.
Oh, yeah, I agree. This is fascism, and it has to be stopped. I'm just sick that what's happening every day. It has to end. And we do. We have to remove Trump from power. I think we have to wait for Mueller's report and impeachment.
You know, we really have to confront the depth and seriousness of this fascism. This is not a normal situation. We cannot deal with this through the normal channels of the system. Fascism can be voted in, but it can't be voted out. The Democratic Party is not even trying to drive out this fascist regime. They're covering up and accommodating for its crimes.
Well, I don't really like the Democrats, and I don't think they're going to stand up to Trump. But I do think the Mueller investigation might come through. I can't wait for the report. They're saying it might come through next week.
On its own, the Mueller investigation will not solve what we face. Even if he does bring indictments, and we don't know if he will, the Democrats have to take action for this to go anywhere. And the Democrats have made clear they're not moving to impeach. As much as the Democrats have differences with Trump, they care much more about maintaining order for the system than they care for justice, even if that means the order of fascism. And even if Trump were indicted and or impeached, this would not in itself lead to the reversal of the fascist program or the ousting of this regime. We need millions in the streets.
Okay, but how do you get that? How could we actually drive them out?
If there was a mass movement from below, waging nonviolent, sustained political protest, growing to millions with one demand, the Trump-Pence regime must go. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. People demanding that this regime must go because it is fascist and not just because of campaign violations. This could change the whole calculus. And sections of those now in power, themselves under attack by this regime, while also conciliating with it, could be compelled to act or to remove this regime from power.
Okay, I guess I can see that, but I just don't see millions of people taking to the streets in America. You know, people really have their heads down right now and their eyes closed. They're not taking to the streets.
Millions are in anguish, and millions have taken to the streets over and over. The problem is they have not set their sights on driving out the regime, and they've gone back to their lives. This gets to the mission and the importance of Refuse Fascism. We're the organization that is working to bring forward a movement of millions. This is why it is so important to financially sustain Refuse Fascism now, to strengthen our national office, our organization, to help increase our reach and influence. There is potential, and there's a lot of work to do, which is exactly why we're calling you. We have a goal of recruiting 50 new monthly sustainers nationwide. We're calling you to ask you to donate to support the fight to change the future for billions around the planet by driving out this fascist regime. How much are you willing to commit monthly to help us reach and activate this critical mass to drive out the regime?
You know, I'm sorry, I'm retired and on a pension. I just don't have money to contribute, but I will come to every protest. I am with you.
We need you to be there, and we're glad that you're going to be there. And we'll definitely let you know everything we're going to do. But as for donations, no amount is too small. Even just $5 a month would be a significant contribution.
Well, okay, I could probably do that, but would it really make a difference?
First, even small sustainers make a difference. Second, here's an idea. Do you think you could pledge to raise some money monthly, invite your friends to join you in supporting Refuse Fascism, hold a bake sale or garage sale or something else, and commit to sustaining for $15 or $20 a month?
Yeah, I guess I could do that. There's a woman I volunteer with who bakes a lot. I could ask her to help me with a bake sale. And I do have friends who hate what's happening. Okay, I will pledge $15 a month.
Great. And one last thing. Do you know anyone who would be interested in what we're doing here at Refuse Fascism that you think we should talk to, friends or relations, who would want to join or support the resistance?
Well, let me think about that. Can we talk again?
Of course, we'll be in touch. We've got a lot to do.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
I want to thank Kat and Barry for being brave, for being vulnerable a little bit, and sharing that model with us, because I think it is really helpful to see, to hear, especially if you haven't done this before, and even if you have, you know, how do we struggle with people to really take the action that matches what we face, and to really invite people to be part of this. So I wanted to highlight a couple things that Barry did, and I know that Kat worked on the script too, so Kat did too. One was everything should come back to the role that that person can play to the maximum extent. So really thinking, how can this person be, you know, once their struggle, which was really important, to not just let that person go, well, okay, thanks, great talking to you, but no, how can this person organize many more people? How can this person, yes, sustain, but also how can they be involved in bringing more people forward? And I think, you know, when Felicia, I think that was her name, was putting out that she just didn't see people in this country taking action, being like, yeah, that's why we need people like you sustaining it. Because whether or not we shake people and wake people up to this fascism that's being hammered into place, and the fact that it's our responsibility, that there isn't going to be a savior, that the only action that matches the danger we face is the people driving it from power and struggling with people, that we're not going to get people in the streets. That's the work that refusefascism.org is working to do. And with your monthly sustainer, that's what you help make possible. So I think that was really important that that connection was made. You know, and I would just encourage people to continue drawing that blood on, okay, so how do you see this working? You know, this is a fascist regime. How is this going to stop? That this could be the Democrats, that this, for some people, is the Mueller investigation. How will that stop a fascist regime? And really drawing some blood around what this fascist regime actually means for people. That it's not just the worst Republican president or something like that. So I encourage everybody to have sessions like that with their chapter before making the call. Review the refusefascism.org Sustainer Drive phone banking script. And I'm just reading what someone wrote in the chat, which they sent privately to me, but I'm going to say to everybody, you know, one thing is that a lot of the people that we're going to call actually are going to be really into the Democrats. And, you know, they're going to have hope with those new women in Congress. And that is really where I think that the script, there's a lot to work from there. People should really read it over, along with looking at Coco's piece that I excerpted. What, you know, how are the Democrats that are collaborating and conciliating and have done so for the past 2 years. How are they going to stop this? You know, and walking, what did they do when babies were put in cages? You know, they talked about border security. So I think that there's a lot of argumentation that we have, a lot of struggle that we need to have with people, you know, not people that don't care, but the people that we're going to be calling are people that care. You've been given lists of people, I think, you've been given lists of people that have made recent donations, some people that have given several times this year. There are people that want to be involved, and there are people that are being told that there's a different way that this can be handled, but it just doesn't match what we face. And every time people go to 2020, we need to go back to this is fascism. And how will your solution handle that? And what harm will that do? What are you willing to accept?